Our theme was Theme 9 Child Abuse Barriers to Learning. Within this PowerPoint, we will discuss the description and background of child abuse, the impact on learners, barrier to learning, and effect on participation, the role of the teacher, the description of resources available within the community, and of course, the summary and bibliography.
The incidence of child abuse in SA is one of the highest worldwide. A child can be abused physically, emotionally, or sexually. All kinds of abuse causes harm to the child and strips the victim of dignity. Physical abuse is any behavior which causes bodily harm or pain to the child. Emotional abuse. Degradation of the victim leads to emotional abuse. Constant criticism, insults, belittling leads to the development of a poor self-concept and also a lack of confidence. The victim is stripped of self-worth and feels inferior. A victim of emotional abuse often feels rejected. The victims feel depressed and displays little or no hope for future prospects. Sexual abuse occurs when sex with a child is used to boost own pleasure or profit. The child is merely a tool through which self-satisfaction becomes possible. It makes the child feel used and dirty. The victims of sexual abuse are often threatened with death or violence to keep them from disclosing the ongoing abuse taking place. On the whole, abuse of any child turns any victim into a sad example of a disrespected, undignified person, stripped of confidence and self-worth, a very hurtful disposition.
How can child abuse impact young learners and what barriers to learning could there be? Also, what effect may it have on a learner's participation in the classroom? Child abuse impacts can be very complex and long-lasting. There are many external factors that affect the impact of the child abuse, and this include the relationship between the child and the perpetrator, the type of abuse the child experiences, is it emotional abuse, physical abuse, or psychological abuse, and also the frequency and severity of the abuse, as to how long the child experiences the abuse and how long or how can she take it. Okay, so violence against children at home, schools, or in their communities could affect the learner's academic life. It will determine whether the learner attends school and remain in school, or whether they are progressing in the classroom in terms of learning outcomes. The third point says children who are abused are more likely to drop out of school before completing high school. So this is all connected to one thing at the end of the day, which is lower academic success, which can cause a low self-esteem and negative psychosocial impact on a child's life. Okay, so child abuse prevents learners from reaching their full potential and academic success, which is definitely not what a child should be experiencing. Like, for if a child gets abused from a young age, this causes a ripple effect in the child's whole life, and all the domains of the child's life get affected in a very negative way, because child participation in class is positively related to academic achievement. The last point says learners who are abused really participate in class, and some show antisocial behavior. For example, when a learner is asked a question in a class, they tend to shy away from answering, and in case of group work, they contribute less. So learners who find it difficult to study, memorize, respond to a teacher's questions are more likely to get low marks across their school subject, because these learners, they don't interact with the teacher in the classroom, and at the same time they don't, or they shy away from interacting with their peers or their classmates in the class. That means the learner doesn't interact with the knowledge at all, so they isolate themselves from others and have little to no social life or social skills. Therefore, the possibilities that this child could excel in their academics is very slim.
The role of the teacher in supporting the learner to improve learner performance so that the learner's full potential is achieved. The teacher should, if the teacher is suspecting any form of child abuse, the teacher should report it to the police or child services. The second point is the teacher should keep a watchful eye on the learner. The teacher should be vigilant at all times. The teacher should create a safe space or environment for the learner. The teacher should always believe in the learner. The teacher should develop coping mechanisms for the learner so that the learner feels comfortable in the class. The teacher should show a caring and accepting attitude. The teacher should set healthy boundaries for the learner so that the learner doesn't feel like the teacher's intruding in the learner's own space. The teacher should seem approachable, or should be approachable rather. The teacher should notice any body language that could be a sign that the learner is experiencing child abuse at home. The teacher should be able to help the learner express their emotions, whether it be through drawings or creative writing. The teacher should set academic goals and provide support at all times. The teacher should help build the learner's self-esteem. The teacher should also give the learner a sense of control in the class, where the learner gets a chance to answer to questions in the class. The teacher should point out positive work that the learner has done to encourage them to keep going. And last but not least, the teacher should ask questions that could give the learner a chance to express their own opinion and talk about their own opinion.
Resources available within the community to assist learners with child abuse as a barrier to learning. There are so many resources available. However, it does keep changing with the times. So, because we live in a modern world where everything's revolved around electronics and social media, that's usually the route that people take when going about reporting child abuse or getting help for child abuse. It is so important for the children to be aware of what they can do if they're in the situation. It's important that the teacher mentions to the children what they could be doing in these situations, because the child often remains quiet and it makes it very difficult to, report these things because of the protocols. But overall, it is about the child's protection. So as much as possible, the teacher should make the children aware of the resources. There are some of the biggest organizations. The first organization is Childline South Africa. That's a top government organization that focuses specifically on children and all the abuse and neglect. It is a non-profit organization. It's very important that, a lot of families don't have money. So to go to a non-profit organization is obviously ideal rather than going somewhere private. They do cater as much as possible to, get into contact any way possible. So telephone numbers, emails, websites, social media, they do have that. Along with this is also child welfare, which is another government-run organization that targets child abuse. The second one is the SAPS, which everyone knows as the South African Police Service. Of course, they have many helplines, one of them being a child helpline. Reporting child abuse to this number could be very important. It's important for children to know that the police in their community are there to help. If they don't have a cell phone to call, they can go to a police station and report it in person, where there is a crisis center most of the time to help with the trauma as well. The final one is Safer Spaces South Africa. This was kind of difficult to find, but it's really good to take note of. So it's a registered NGO that targets abuse for over the past 18 years. They provide counseling and trauma sessions for each individual victim that arrives. They also try to provide all the basic necessities that the victim may need. This includes transport, schooling, access to legal services, meals, clothing, toiletries. They really try to take care of the victims as much as they possibly can. They don't focus solely on child abuse, but they do assist with child abuse cases. They also have multiple means of contact. The involvement of the community is also vital to child abuse. It's so important that neighbors get to know each other so they can, see whether they suspect any child abuse. Another great way for communities to get involved is to volunteer. Volunteer at safe houses, volunteer at police stations, crisis centers. Just make sure that the children know that they are taken care of, even if they aren't taken care of at home. We all have the power to stop child abuse.
Our assignment was based on the fact that providing learning support to all learners requires a thorough knowledge and understanding of different barriers to learning experienced by many of the children at our schools. In this presentation, we discussed how the socio-economic factor, child abuse, impacts on learner performance in the classroom. Child abuse is defined as a consistent act of commission or omission that endangers or impairs a child's physical or emotional health and development. All kinds of abuse cause harm to the child and strips the victim of dignity. The incidence of child abuse in SA is one of the highest worldwide. The impact of child abuse can be very complex and long-lasting. There are many factors that affect the impacts of child abuse. To mention a few, the relationship between the child and the perpetrator, the type of abuse, and the frequency and severity of the abuse. Specifically, violence against the child at home, in their communities, or even at schools could affect how they perform academically. The child abuse can determine whether the learner actually attends school or remains in school. Children who are abused and neglected have higher chances of performing poorly with regards to academics. In the end, child abuse can prevent learners from reaching their full potential and academic success, which is not what a child should be experiencing. The teacher plays a major role in supporting the learner to improve learner performance so that the learner's full potential is achieved. It is important that if a teacher suspects any form of child abuse or neglect, they need to immediately report this issue to Child Protection Services as well as the police. The teacher should always keep a watchful eye on the learner, especially the learner's behavior, schoolwork, and needs. One must remember that a classroom should be a safe space for the learner, and a teacher should do their best to ensure that all their learners feel comfortable in their space. This can be achieved by having a positive attitude with the learners, but they should also have an accepting and caring attitude to essentially build trust. Every learner needs to be respected, and the teacher is the one who can make their students feel like they are heard. Be accepting and also build up their self-esteem and identity by pointing out their strengths. How a teacher treats her classroom and her students make a big difference for any of the students that may be experiencing child abuse at home. There are many resources available within the community to assist learners with child abuse that have had a barrier to learning because of their abuse. There are helplines, social services, and many others. However, the teacher needs to make sure that they have expressed these options to their learners so that they know that there are people who can help them and they are not alone.
And of course, as the saying goes, give credit where credit is due. Here is a complete list of references, a complete bibliography in either APA or Harvard format. Thank you so much for watching our PowerPoint, and we hope that this helped. We hope that you learned something and you know what to do when it comes to child abuse and neglect cases.